Most of US companies have their supply chains in China. They have to pay 19% tariffs. That's crazy. So Mexico is poised to benefit the most from this war.
Because?
Nearshoring. It's a big thing in Mexico because US companies are de-riskifying their supply chain. So they still have a lot of providers in China, but now they open a facility in Mexico. So they have a facility in Mexico and they de-risk their supply chain.
Welcome back to the TFC Business Show. I'm your host, Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and today we are in Guangzhou. Westin Hotel in Guangzhou. Thank you to our friends at World First to bring us here to the Canton Fair, and that's kind of how I got to know Pablo, right? So, you want to introduce yourself for our audience that don't know you?
Hey guys, I'm Pablo Rocha. I'm from Mexico, born and raised in Mexico City, and I'm the co-founder and CEO at Tally Legal. We are the best incorporation platform in Mexico. I'm a lawyer, so I used to work at like big law firms for my whole career, and then
So why do you quit?
I didn't like the tie and being like very formal. So I became an entrepreneur and we founded Tally 5 years ago. So the mission was very simple. Incorporating a company in Mexico is super bureaucratic process. It can take more than 5 months.
5 months?
Yeah, some companies spend half a year trying to incorporate in Mexico.
Why?
It's because all the process was manual and not digital.
Okay.
And you need at least 4 or 5 different service providers in Mexico, which are an accountant, a lawyer, a notary, a fiscal address, and a legal representative. So imagine dealing with 7 or 6 different service providers. That is just crazy.
So you guys disrupted it and pull everything together into your platform.
Exactly.
Okay.
What we do is we help companies expand into Mexico in a seamless, fully digital way, one-stop shop where you can do your accounting, tax filing, and everything from abroad. So if you would like to make business in Mexico, search us.
Okay, fair. And thank you for doing this podcast with me in English.
Of course.
I know your mother tongue is Spanish, right? So
Yes.
we'll do our best, right? If any questions, put in the comment section and then we'll take it from there. But we met a lot of people over the course of the past few days at the Canton Fair. I primarily wanted to do this with you with the backdrop of the US-China, trade war. Because we were on the bus going for dim sum, and then they were saying, "Oh yeah, a lot of companies are registering in Mexico so that they can route out of this as a strategy, to manage their business." So I was like, "Oh, that is very interesting, right?" And I think for a lot of Singapore companies or even Malaysian companies, it's a little bit of like, "Oh, we never really thought about that yet." So I wanted to discuss that with you, right? So maybe for a start, help us lay the ground on how are you looking at the US-China trade dispute or trade war?
Well, first, let me give a little of context. We all know that there is a commercial war between the US and China. The US imposed high tariffs on all Chinese goods, which disrupt the whole supply chain of US companies, right? Most of US companies have their supply chains in China. And then from one day to another, they have to pay 19% tariffs. That's crazy. So Mexico is poised to benefit the most from this war.
Because?
Nearshoring. That's a term in Mexico, everybody talks about nearshoring, right?
Really?
Yeah, it's a big thing in Mexico because what US companies are doing right now is de-riskifying their supply chain. So they still have a lot of providers in China, but now they open a facility in Mexico. So they have a facility in Mexico and they de-risk their supply chain. So that's what's happening. And a lot of Chinese companies are using Mexican entities to sell into the US and benefit of the Mexican, US, and Canada free trade agreement.
Yeah. Can you also expand a little bit on the Mexican, Canada, and the US, the free trade agreement? Yeah. Because I only hear it on the news. There's a little bit of a discussion, but I don't know on the ground, from an executioner standpoint, how does it look like?
The last agreement was called NAFTA.
Yeah.
It's the North America Free Trade Agreement. And 2 years ago, it was renegotiated between the 3 parties. And it's called the USMC agreement. It's a huge agreement to do free trade between the 3 countries. And overall, you can import goods into the US without any tariff across industries.
So free, totally free.
Yes.
Everything is free.
Mainly food industry, vehicle industry, which is huge in Mexico, are the ones that benefit the most. But you have a lot of goods without any tax.
Okay. So that is the backdrop as to what is the value proposition, right? Of
Exactly.
doing business in Mexico today.
That's it.
Right. Okay. So what are some of these Chinese companies trying to do within what you can say? You're trying to elaborate it for us, right? Like, what are they trying to do in Mexico, to kind of route out of this whole situation?
It's quite simple. Let me put an example in the automobile industry. Most of the car manufacturers have facilities in Mexico. So the trade agreement between the US and Mexico and Canada states that you pay zero taxes or tariffs on all the imported vehicles, but there's one rule. 75% of the parts of the car must be produced in North America or in the region.
Okay.
So what's happening, for example, Toyota, Volkswagen, all of the big car manufacturers have plants in Mexico. And they also have a lot of providers in Southeast Asia and China. So what's happening? These car manufacturers are telling them, perfect, I'm going to continue buying this part for my car from you, but you have to put your facility here in Puebla next to me and sell it from a Mexican company. And that's how the car industry is booming in Mexico. But there's a little turmoil with the US elections, right?
Yeah.
Because Trump announced that if he wins, he's going to impose 100% tariffs on Chinese cars coming from Mexico. So we have to wait and see what happens.
Okay. So from this point of view, essentially, there are two things that are happening, right? One thing is the Chinese companies are reallocating their supply chain into Mexico so that they can kind of benefit from this situation. And then there's the other part about the overall sales process being shifted over from Mexico into the US, right? So that's kind of the situation.
Yes, definitely. Let's remember that the US market is still the biggest market in the world. And everybody wants to sell there. So the best way to sell into the US market is not through China, it's through Mexico.
Okay, so everybody is trying to play the game, right? And be a little smarter about it. At this point in time, that's what a lot of Chinese companies are trying to do to tap into Mexico, right? So is the Mexican government trying to do something to welcome more people in, more incentives?
Yeah, they say they do. They but not really. I have one great example. Chinese marketplaces like Shein or Temu are growing rapidly in Mexico.
Really?
Yeah, so they have a lot of Chinese sellers selling into Mexico directly to consumers. And what the government announced last week was that they're gonna begin regulating the tax status of the sellers of these platforms in Mexico. This means any Chinese seller selling through Temu or Shein in Mexico or Mercado Libre or Amazon has to have a tax ID in Mexico. This is huge. So imagine they have 100,000 sellers in their platforms. Every single one of them must have a Mexican tax ID.
So that's why you're here.
And the best way to do it
is through Tally Legal.
is to Tally owning a company in Mexico.
Okay, fair. So that is the marketplace level, government trying to crack down on it.
Exactly.
But from relocating businesses over, all these, or even registering entities in Mexico, right? Is the government doing anything,
yes, we do have tax breaks for exporters. So we're waiting to see what the new president does, right? Like we have a new president in Mexico, the first woman in history to be the president in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum. She's so popular. She won
all the way. Landslide.
Yeah. So she said that she's gonna incentivize foreign companies coming into Mexico. But even if they don't provide any tax break for foreign companies, we had the biggest foreign investment year on the history of Mexico. And it grew 30% year over year.
30%?
Yes, that's crazy.
Wow. Okay.
But a lot of local governments, like from the different states, are trying to incentivize industries to come to their states by providing fiscal incentives.
So like giving you grants,
exactly.
loan support.
For example, if you are in the northern border, you pay less VAT.
Value added tax, right?
Yes, you pay 8% VAT instead of 16% in the rest of the country.
Tell me a little bit more. What do you mean by the border?
So you have to set up your facility on the border of the Mexico and the US.
Okay.
So in the northern border, and you pay less taxes.
So if you set up your facilities in the northern border, close to the US, less taxes, you mean like you pay your suppliers less tax?
Yeah,
because it's actually going through multiple transactions,
8%
right?
VAT, and that's better. Also, there is a certification in Mexico called the INMEX, which is for exporters. If you build a facility only for exporting, you delay the payment of taxes until you get paid. So this incentivizes like producers, manufacturers that only want to export. That's one of the ways of the government is benefiting exporters to set up in Mexico and selling to the US.
Okay, fair. Can I just dig a little bit into the VAT side of things? Because in Singapore, we have this thing called GST. It's the
GST.
same thing.
Okay.
Okay. It's just different names. But as a company, we pass the tax along. If you are a supplier of mine, you charge me the VAT, I can offset that VAT when I pass to the next person. It's a single tax layer instead of a compounded tax layer. Is that the same situation?
It's the same. It's the same way. Yeah, you pass it when you sell, and that's
And
it.
then we can talk to the government and
Yes.
from the tax department and take it back,
Exactly.
right? Pretty much. Okay.
Yeah, the government doesn't like to pay back value-added tax, but yeah.
Okay. That's a different discussion.
Different
right?
discussion. Different
But
discussion.
okay, so that's the tax side of things, and there's some leeway if you are in certain jurisdiction, and if you're export oriented, there's also certain systems there that is a bit different as compared to just selling locally,
Yes.
right? Okay, so then what about like grants or like loans? Do you have those sort of things, or maybe I'm too much of a Singaporean? It's a little bit of a so the government is not gonna like give me money to do something there. No.
Unfortunately, we don't. We had programs, but the last administration cut those programs off. Like we had a startup program. We had something called Pro Mexico, which was a government branch which went on through the world to bring companies, to bring investment, to bring tourists. But Pro Mexico no longer exists. They cut it off. Last administration. Let's see what happened next.
Okay.
But as of today, the government won't give you any grant to set up a factory in Mexico. In Singapore, they do a lot, or what?
A lot. Yeah. Shout out to EDB. They work very hard for all these things, right? But okay,
Yeah.
different countries have different arrangements, different systems. I think it's not about who is better or not, but it's just trying to understand whether it fits your business, right? Whether it works for you, right? So maybe it works. It's a different thing. That's kind of laying the ground for companies to register locally in Mexico and all that, right? But what about the local business environment in Mexico? Give us a bit of a flavor of it. I think a lot of our listeners may not even travel there before, right? So like, how's the local market like? What is the economy? That all that kind of
Okay,
stuff.
so Mexico is not a small country.
Yeah, it's huge.
We have 130 million people. We are the largest Spanish-speaking country on earth, and we are 3 or 4 times bigger than any other Spanish-speaking country in Latam. So being close to the US is super good for the economy because you're able to sell into the US good. The consumer market in Mexico is great. The e-commerce market grew 40% last year.
40%.
40%.
So this for local consumers.
The
Okay.
fastest growing e-commerce market in the world.
Wow.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah, what sells?
Mercado Libre is the biggest one.
Okay.
Mercado Libre
So that's
is like
a local-
Amazon. Yeah.
Okay.
Not even local, it's regional.
Ah.
They started out in Argentina and then they grew up.
Can you say that again? What is the name of that platform?
Mercado Libre.
Mercado Libre.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's huge in Mexico.
Okay. Then what type of products sell very well?
Everything.
Mexicans want everything.
Mexicans buy everything through Mercado Libre and Amazon. From a hammer to a mowed loaner to clothes. So the e-commerce is booming. And I think it's booming everywhere, right? After the pandemic, it accelerated like the rate of buyers by a lot.
Because like in Singapore, and I think also in Malaysia, and I would say also in China, because e-commerce has grown so much, it's eating into like physical stores, right? Retail, commercial spaces. Is it the same situation in Mexico?
I think it's a global phenomena. Like retailers are not doing so well and the e-commerce are eating the world.
And that's a part that could open up an interesting opportunity. Maybe not so much in Singapore because space is very expensive.
Yeah.
But I see in Malaysia, in Thailand, there's a lot more like new type of shops that are opening up, experiential outlets, because the traditional retail does not work anymore. But there are all these spaces and it's still there. And talking about it, right? Do you have some insights into the rental situation in Mexico? Because usually in Singapore, I think you got to put like 3 months ahead, like a deposit, right? So what is the kind of usual practice in Mexico?
We have a client that is opening like retail space because it's cheaper now you can negotiate better deals with the mall or with the shopping center. But in Mexico, you pay month deposit and then that's it. In some like very popular shopping malls, you have to pay something like one-time fee to get in. It's called aguante. So you paid one time and that's it.
Okay.
And it's quite expensive in some shopping centers.
Yeah. So as with all big malls around the world, right, they control the funnel and they expect you to pay a lump sum, right? Okay. So that's kind of like the rental systems over there. Okay. What about labor?
Okay, so labor in Mexico is not as cheap as China
I don't think China is that cheap anymore.
anymore, right?
Yeah.
But our minimum wage is $500 a month.
Minimum wage, that means this is a mandatory throughout the country.
Yes, $500 a month.
Okay, just to help us understand, there is no variance depending on the industry.
No, that's the minimum wage.
Okay, blanket. Yeah, because in Singapore, we don't have this.
You don't have minimum wage?
Yeah, we don't have minimum wage. We have progressive wage model, which essentially it's trying to draw a floor, like a minimum wage, quote unquote, minimum wage. Don't attack me. Quote unquote, minimum wage for different industries, right? So maybe the maintenance will have a minimum wage, a different minimum wage for another industry.
Makes more sense.
I don't know, right? That's for the market to decide.
For example, in Mexico, like a rule of thumb, Social Security in Mexico costs like 30 to 40%.
Okay, so whatever wage, there's a 30-40% on top.
1.3. It depends, of course, on the wage you pay your employees. If they earn more, you pay more. And if they earn less, you pay less. Like if you pay minimum wage, you pay 0%, zero as the Social Security.
But how many people really earn minimum wage? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah, especially if you're in the big cities, unlikely, right? And
unlikely. But a lot of people in the provinces still earn minimum wage.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
But you can argue that in the provinces, that is good money. Because I think it's kind of like the same in Malaysia. Like the minimum wage will not allow you to live in the city. It's crazy. But in the province,
Everything is much cheaper, right? And if you live with minimum wage, you can buy your stuff and save money. That's like Social Security. If you fire an employee, you have to pay them 3 months of salary.
this is the law.
This is the law.
Okay.
If it's an unjustified firing, right? If you just have to fire them, 3 months payment. And there's also a tax that you have to share your profits with the workers of the company.
Real?
You have to pay the 10% of your profits goes to all your workers.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
That's the law. But the
What is it
reality
called?
is PTU. So it's participation of workers on profits.
Okay.
The reality is most companies have, like for example, American Express has two entities. One there where they hire all their employees and one where they take profits.
Come on, people.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's the gray area, which is legal, but
But yeah, it defeats the purpose,
it
right?
defeats the purpose.
But in Mexico, it's a flat minimum wage across.
Yeah.
$500.
And also, Mexican economy is reliant on cash. We use cash a lot.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's not like here in China, I'm impressed. You use Weixin to pay everything and that's it. No, in Mexico, cash is king. Still.
Still. Huh.
There are a lot of companies and a lot of opportunities for fintechs to disrupt the market. But I think it's going to take more time than they expected, right? The fintech consumers are trying to eliminate cash. We've been hearing like for the last 5 or 7 years that cash is going to be eliminated in Mexico. But tradition is
It's still there.
still there. For example, in Brazil, they use something called Pix, which the whole economy uses. It's like a direct bank-to-bank, account-to-account payment system like WeChat, and they eliminated the use of cash. But in Mexico, we still use a lot
Not
of
there
cash.
yet. That's an opportunity. Okay, interesting. So essentially, if this year I make a profit of $10 million, I have to take out 1 million to share amongst.
All your workers.
Okay. And is it like a equal sharing headcount per headcount or?
No, it depends on the seniority and
And that one is up to the companies to decide.
yes.
Okay, you see another loophole. Yeah. So okay, we're not encouraging loopholes, yeah. We're just
Yeah.
yeah. I think it's high time that companies take better care of the people. right? Because you cannot just keep squeezing
Exactly.
the people dry, right? So, no loopholes, huh? Don't do those things.
I agree. If you pay your workers
Shit, right? You get shit people, yeah.
and you get a turnover of 100%,
Yeah.
and then it's worse for the business.
Yeah, of course. And I know your team is actually very small for the amount of clients that
Yeah,
you're servicing.
of course.
Right? You have like 20 plus people?
27 employees.
27 people,
Yeah.
but you serve 18,000 customers.
18,000 customers from 20 countries.
You see? The power of technology, right? Yeah. Woo. Okay, cool. I think that's a kind of like a good lay of the land to just kind of understand rental, labor, different things. Beyond this, are there any other big things that people care about when they are venturing into Mexico?
The Mexican market is booming, and also a lot of people from Argentina or Colombia or Chile are looking into Mexico, right? Because their economies are 1/4 of the size of Mexico. So when they have a successful business, they always try to expand into Mexico. So this makes the market
Much bigger. Oh.
more competitive and better for everyone.
Okay.
So most of our clients are from Argentina, Chile, and Colombia. We know the future is China. That's why we're in Guangzhou. But right now, we help a lot of Latin Americas expand into Mexico.
Okay, fair. So is that a situation of like a circle there, right? Because like in Singapore, I think it's very easy to just expand to Malaysia and vice versa, right? And I was talking to some of the Chinese suppliers here, and I asked them, why are you still doing OEM, right? Which for all of you that don't know OEM, it's just like they produce the goods and then another person slaps a label and sell it in their home country, right? So I asked them, why are you still doing OEM? And they say because it's very expensive for them to establish a whole marketing, branding, ecosystem outside of China because they already do it here, right? And they want to go to America, they got to set up the whole thing. In America, it's very expensive, right? And I think that's the same for like Singapore because it's a small place. So you set up like the whole marketing thing, it's not very worth it, right?
Yeah.
But in Mexico, Argentina, Peru, this whole area, is it one cultural ecosystem? Like, do people sing the same songs, listen to the same celebrities? You know what I mean? So you kind of can mix more value, yeah.
We have 650 million people live in the region.
650 million.
Brazil is the biggest economy, and I would say Brazil is a different continent because they do Portuguese, and the economy is quite big, so they have a big, strong market. And Brazilians,
so they're like playing their own game.
Yes, they don't look to expand into Colombia or Argentina. Like they have Brazil, and they have enough. So Brazil is like doing their own thing. And then there's the Spanish-speaking countries, which Mexico is the biggest one. I would say the culture is pretty similar. I don't know if it's the same in Singaporean and Malaysians.
Okay, so I think it's a little bit similar, I would say. My thought process is like, okay, I mean, let's take the lamest example is if today I get a Mexican superstar as my brand ambassador, is this person recognized in Peru and Argentina? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if they are, then there is one cultural loop, right? Yeah.
It depends. If it's football, soccer, Messi is the GOAT and everybody loves him. Mexican television was pretty like soap operas. They were broadcasted to the rest of Latam, so they became pretty popular. But we do have like the same tastes in celebrities, but the music, the traditions, the food is quite different in each country.
Fair, of course. But you know what I'm saying, right? Because if I take, $1 million to build a brand online for 5 million people, which is in Singapore, it does not make sense, right? But if I take that million to build a brand for a 300 million community, which is, Mexico and the broader Spanish-speaking South America region, then it's a different story, right? The kind of target group, it's much bigger.
Of course. I think you are able to build a brand for the region of Latin America, one unified brand, and you can speak to Colombians and Mexicans a bit different, right? You change a few words and that's it.
Yeah.
But the message can be the same. We are pretty similar in that sense.
Fair. After kind of visiting the Canton Fair, what are some things that you find interesting that could go into Mexico?
Our focus right now is building a bridge between China and Mexico, right? So I see a lot of opportunities. I see an opportunity where Chinese manufacturers can sell directly to the end consumer in Mexico without intermediaries. So they manufacture in China and they sell in Mercado Libre and Amazon with their own brands. So that way they can build a brand on the long term and they can improve their margins, right? So that's what Tali is all about, building that bridge between Chinese manufacturers and Mexican consumers.
What about Mexican products or Mexican companies coming over? Do you have any thoughts on
China?
that? Yeah, yeah.
For example, we like tacos, you know? We always eat tacos.
Yeah.
China doesn't eat tacos. So even though I think Maseca, which is the biggest producer of tortillas in the world, is already in China. They have a facility in China.
Okay.
So they are huge. There are big companies in Mexico that already have a presence in China. But I think there's also a golden opportunity in Mexico. So we have a lot of focus on taking the opportunity, you know? It's a once in a lifetime opportunity
yeah,
in Mexico also.
Fair.
So I don't see a lot of Mexican companies expanding into China.
It's easy where you are already, right? Yeah. So why go out?
You have a big enough market, right? So if you expand into China, it's a different culture, it's different traditions. And if you expand into Latin America, which is 400 million people, Spanish speaking Latin America, you have a big enough market and you can build a billion-dollar brand.
Yeah, okay, fair. So in other words, we can tap on that market, right? Yeah. The other way around, not there yet. Okay. So I want to ask something that's a little bit more politically not so correct, right? Is it safe? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of Singaporeans or even Malaysians, when they think of Mexico, it's like cartel,
Yes.
drug and all that, right? And rightfully, wrongfully, that's for you to say, but that's the impression that people have, right? So just want to kind of very amateurly ask, what is your take on it? Like how should we think about it?
Of course, there are parts of Mexico that are dangerous. I believe in every country in the world,
Every country.
but not Singapore.
Singapore is an island. There's no corner for you to do weird things. It's very hard. Yeah.
There are some dangerous places for sure. But overall, Mexico is safe. If you go to the major cities, you'll be fine. Mexico City has two neighborhoods where foreigners are like 80% of the population.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So you go to a restaurant in Mexico City and everybody speaks the waiters speak to you in English.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't happen 10 years ago. And now a lot of expats, mainly from the US or nomads, like working for US entities, living in Mexico, spending in pesos, are living in Mexico. So it's a nice place. We also have great beaches,
Yeah.
like world famous Cancun. Well, you also have great beaches all over Southeast Asia, but we have the Caribbean. So I would recommend to go to Mexico. It's a pretty nice place.
Okay, fair.
Great
fair.
climate.
Yeah. I hope that elevates your concern, but if you have any specific questions, you can put in the comment section, or talk to Pablo's team, right? And let's see where this goes. Okay. So yeah, any last things you want to add or any kind of like business subculture, like over here, it's a lot of like eating, drinking, like connecting with people to do business. Is it the same in Mexico?
Definitely. And I think that's one of the biggest differences between Mexico and the rest of Latin America. A lot of our clients from Argentina, Chile, and Colombia. In Mexico, in order to make business, you have to dinner. You have to take tequila shots. So it's the same. We have that similarity. And I didn't notice until they told us, like, hey, in Chile and Argentina, it's like more straightforward, like European.
Yeah, let's just get it done.
Makes
right?
sense?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, go.
And that's it. And in Mexico, we like the relationship side of business.
Okay. Fair. That's a good insight. Okay, so with that, I think we've come to the end, right? If our audience would like to get to know your team a little bit better, where can they find you? Where's the best place to talk to you and connect with you?
I use the most LinkedIn, and they can find us at Tally Legal. That's TALLY legal.io.
Okay, so with that, that's the end of the TFC Business Show today. I think it's very fun, and I hope to do more. So let's see, right? But special thanks to the team at World First that brought us together. So yeah, that's it. See ya.
Bye bye.
Bye.